Thank you so much. Sarita Talks, we are moving and a grooving. We've got some of my favorite guests. The people who I just really want to talk to, no discount to my free world friends, are those with lived experience. The people who have been in the same places and spaces that I am in, and now we're on the other side, impacting change, showing that they're humans just like us. That's what brings Brother Rob Lilly on the show. Gratitude, Brother Rob, gratitude, gratitude. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about the great state of Texas, because they say don't mess with it. And then tell us about all the things you organize, sir.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Sarita, for
Absolutely.
welcoming me onto this show.
Mhm.
And peace and blessings to all the guests that are listening out there. If I could just succinctly tell you what's important about my life, I would probably start off with my context. I come from New York City, and that's important because I grew up in New York City in the 1970s. And New York City was a blighted, impoverished community with a lot of devastation and a lot of violence. And it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen coincidentally. There were policies in place that affected the people. And that is one of the reasons that I'm motivated to do the work of organizing today, because I realize even when you see yourself as seemingly insignificant, people at the top make decisions that can tremendously negatively affect your quote unquote seemingly insignificant life, right? So
Absolutely.
we've got to learn how to be a part of resisting those oppressive forces and
Hmm.
bringing about the type of change that we want to see in our lives. So New York City is the foundation for my worldview, the experiences I had there. But then I had a shift, and my mother died when I was a child of 8, and her dream was to move to California. My father honored that dream and took her children, all 4 of us. I'm the oldest of 4,
I love that.
all of us to California, and we started a life anew there. Unfortunately, we got there in the beginning of the '80s, which was at the height
Crack
of
epidemic.
crack. Well, crack didn't really hit us until '84, in
Okay.
California, but the gang explosion was already off the scales when we got there, and so pretty soon I was involved in the gang culture. And within a very short period of time, with the culture shock of leaving my home, traveling to this new and unfamiliar place,
Hmm.
I found myself acting out and ultimately entering and exiting the juvenile system, California Youth Authority, several occasions.
And
And go ahead.
I just
Yeah.
want to point out that's not an anomaly. That's not an exception. That's the. Let me tell you, so many kids from being uprooted from one position and go or from one house, one location, going to another. What a shock. Don't mess around and be a teenager at the same time. And this man had just lost his mother. So a lot of times when people fall into these circumstances of gangs, it's not like, oh, I just went out looking for a gang, I just want a new set of friends, that's what I was going to do. They seemed exciting, they seemed fun, there was so much going on. Oh my god, gangs don't have paychecks. There's
No.
no benefit plan. There's no future in it. So you go because that's what everybody else is doing. And it's hard to fit in sometimes. So that's
Yeah.
a whole nother conversation on peer pressure. But now we're exposed to juvenile. We've already been exposed. I'm talking about you, Brother Lilly, because I have a past like that too. I grew up in a very nice suburban neighborhood. My dad left my mom. We moved to Section 8 housing. It was a whole different crew. And I got a leader inside of me. Just because I talk like this, I walk like this, and I hold myself a certain way, I'm still to be, respected too, even though I'm 12, 13 years old, and I'm out here fending for myself. Can you echo some of that? Or
Absolutely.
do you feel like that played a key part in what happened with incarceration?
Absolutely. So
Me too.
what I would describe what you're saying is compounded trauma. I
Mm,
experienced my mother's death, did not understand grieving. There was
hmm.
nobody to really help me understand how to hold those very conflicting and weighty emotions. And then on top of that, you move me from everything familiar, anything that was comfortable or familiar to me. I'm now My father didn't ask my permission. He just did what he did. He thought he was doing the right thing.
Right.
And so we're in California, and now I've got this whole new strange world to adjust to. And on top of that, the streets got rules. So, going to school, if you wore a certain color, you were at risk of getting jumped. And so pretty soon it became clear to me that either I was going to get in where I could fit in, or I was going to have a very difficult time navigating that reality. And that may
Mhm.
sound simplified to some people, but until you walk a mile in my shoes, you can't judge my actions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of things stem from our youth, and I feel like a lot of times in sentencing or taking into context someone's crime, they leave all of that out. Like, you just popped up that one day, committed that crime, and that's where your life began. And that's not how that goes. Would you
No,
agree?
absolutely not. That's why when you ask me about myself, the only way I can begin to talk about myself is in my context. You know, I,
Yeah,
I had a mother,
that's
I
who
had a
you
father.
are.
Right. That's a part of the makeup that created my worldview, my outlook on life, how I saw my future or prospects for the future. And it would take years for me to begin to unlearn some of the things I unfortunately learned as a child. So moving along, I was living in California for about 7, 8 years until I
Mhm.
hit my 18th or 19th birthday. I exited out of the juvenile facility. I did 3 years in the
Gee, that's a long time in juvenile.
it was a long time. I was sentenced for a strong arm robbery. I took a gold chain from somebody at school by force, and I used it to buy drugs, crack cocaine. And
Mhm.
as a result of that, I found myself, uh, you know, being judged for the
And
commission of robbery.
so let me do the math. Were you 15?
I was around 15. I sometimes I get the numbers a little confused, but I was around 15 when I went in.
So for 15, something that happened at school, it was deemed necessary for you to go to juvenile detention for 3 years?
Well, I was
That wouldn't happen
actually
to a young white child.
To be quite candid, I was actually expelled from the school, and I came back up to the school grounds, and so,
Oh.
and later on arrested off of the school grounds, and unfortunately, it was a legal matter at
Was
that.
that for trespass?
I trespassed, but I think at the end of the day, it was because I forcibly took the chain from the young man,
Okay.
and he pressed charges. So
Okay.
when law enforcement got involved, whether it was on school at that point or not, it was a legal matter, and it had to play out. So
Okay.
for 3 years, I did. Go ahead. You want to ask another
Yeah,
question?
well, no, I just want to say this, and I'm not a big fan on using the race card or anything like that. However, money and circumstance have a lot to do with a lot of different things. And I just feel like this too. A lot of times when I hear something like that, I just go ahead and change the color of the character.
Mhm.
And I just think of a 15-year-old boy from a well-off family that goes to school, takes something from somebody as a little bully, because sometimes that's what we do, comes back, and I just don't see that little young man getting 3 years. I just don't.
I
And,
actually got I actually got 6 years, and I did 3 years on the 6 years. So I did have 50% of the time that I was there. And while I was there, I worked for United Airlines, doing tickets, taking passengers information. So essentially, I was being exploited for my labor, even
yeah,
as a juvenile in the prison system, which is a practice that is common throughout the United States
slaves.
of America. Mhm.
Mhm.
So, like yourself, the evidence is very clear that African Americans, people of color, ultimately are disproportionately impacted by our carceral systems. And I would not learn these things nor these terms
Mhm.
until years later, as I look back, and I was like, why me?
Yeah.
Why is this happening to me? I mean, I don't think I'm incorrigible. I don't think I'm incapable of living a meaningful life, but I had found myself in circumstances that were leading to law enforcement contact. And every time I had contact with law enforcement, usually the outcome was I would be incarcerated. And what I
Mhm.
now know today is that my communities that I lived in were over policed.
Oh
And as a
yeah.
result of being policed excessively, we had more opportunities for law enforcement contact, which led to more arrests, which leads to more legal proceedings, which ultimately, for many of us who don't have the means, leads to incarceration.
And what really is like a sad point to have to make is a lot of people on the upper levels of legislation see us as throwaway people.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter what color you are. If they can hit you with the right charge and get you there, you are a number and you are making money. Just your presence. And there's that big deception, taxpayer money. This is a for profit system. This man, as he just told you, had a job within the facility. I had a job. I had to make 276 crotches for men's boxer shorts, or else I might not have a job. And I started off at 30 cents, worked my way up to 50, and then 71 cents an hour for a 10-hour day, 40-hour weeks in a prison factory, pouring in sweat, worried about making a quota for $7.10 a day, and started from $3 a day. And that was one of the best jobs available to me as a Class A felon. We are not throwaway people, and I'm so glad Brother Rob is here to represent my brothers in the struggle. I'm here to represent the women, that we are human beings with redeemable, don't judge me on a decision that took me 5 seconds to make
I love
for
that.
the rest of my life.
I love that what you're saying, because I think for me, a great part of what my freedom has been unlearning the master's deception, unlearning the ways in which my mind has been used against me through miseducation. And I don't believe that there's any redeemable values to imprisonment, but nonetheless, I chose to use my circumstance. Though they meant it for my harm, I used it for my good. And as a result of that, I began to matriculate through the educational process, starting with getting my GED, because I was first remanded into custody in 10th grade. And now I'm asking myself questions about the world, about my future. Now, mind you, I was young, but still it was the beginnings of the stirrings for what you would see today, which is a person who sees themselves as equally human as anyone else, in spite of my past errors. The world, everyone makes an error. Everyone falls short of a standard, right? Whether it's their own standard or someone else's standard for them. And I'm not the last greatest mistake that I made, and I refuse to allow anyone to impose that on me indefinitely. And although I live in a society that says forgiveness out of one side of his mouth, but on the other side of his mouth it has condemnation, I have to continually ask myself, how do I see myself? Because regardless of what the system says about me, I've got to define my own inner reality. And so I tell brothers and sisters when I go to speak in different locations, I say, I said the odds may be against us, but we've got to be against the odds.
That's right.
And what that means for me is not that I can just in a fanciful way in my mind overcome my circumstances. I do believe the mind has a great deal to do with our determination, but I believe that we're stronger when we learn how to work together.
That's right. Oh, that's right. And here's another thing too, though. You mentioned when we are coming out of incarceration, you know what? There's got to be a certain level of respect for people who come out with a deficit. A deficit of years, a deficit of education, a deficit of opportunity, a deficit of resources, a deficit of holistic healing. You know what I'm saying? Your spiritual, your mental, your physical, everything. We are at a deficit. Okay. So a lot of times it's easy for people to pick out that exception story to, well, they got out and they kept doing this. They kept doing this. They haven't learned their lesson yet, or God is still working on them, or we don't know their testimony and it's still being written. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Okay. However, where I'm going with this is we are working from a place where most people, they start off with some type of foundation. When you're released, a lot of times you're leaving with the clothes on your back. We are coming from a deficit, and at the same time, we are trying to lift up and encourage. So give us the respect that we are due, but at the same time, give that respect to somebody you feel like doesn't deserve it, because that person might deserve it more than you. Judge not, lest ye be judged.
I think for me, to your point, losing my mother at such a young age gave me a certain kind of predisposition, an empathy and a compassion that finally I've tapped into as an adult. So when I see other people suffering, I can relate to that, because I remember very vividly what it was like to grow up in a house where, there was nobody to take care of us because dad had to go out and take care of, getting the income. So our home was left to disrepair because there was nobody to care for the children. Eventually we'd have a stepmother, but that opened up a whole new set of complications.
Can of worms. Yeah.
But nonetheless, it taught me how to see in others their suffering, and through that suffering to see the human being, because sometimes we act out in our hurt seeking
Mhm.
attention, but we don't know how to say, hey, I need help. I need some support.
Yeah, not what's wrong. What happened to you? And how can I help you? I get it. I get it and I get it. Now, me and Brother Rob, we were talking, Sister Sarita and Brother Rob.
Yeah.
We were talking prior to coming on about something, and it's so sad. I've wanted this for myself, for people after I went through the experience of being locked up, never have been in trouble like never would have woke up and thought I was going to jail for murder. Okay, so I'm sitting in county jail. I know all the circumstances. I've got paperwork. I don't understand. I've never been in trouble like this. My lawyer is not helping me the way I need to be helped. I'm trying to, be in the law library. I've got all the faith. I'm trying to put in the work. However, it was becoming painfully obvious that my lawyer did not have my best intentions at heart. He just wanted to give me some time, send me down the river, and I would be just fine. Okay, and that was the way he looked at it. He really didn't care about the circumstances. He didn't care about anything. Let's just hurry up. You've been in county almost 3 years. Let's get you some time and get you on down the street. So as you were telling me about participatory defense, if somebody would have told me or given me any bit of instruction, I would have fought harder for myself because I would have known that was an option.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna turn it over to you in a minute, but the system is set up that if you go in with time that you are forced into a plea, you are forced into a plea, or you are threatened that you will never see the light of day again. That is a strong possibility. And most cases are resolved by a plea deal. So they get so accustomed to that it really guilt, innocence, circumstances, whatever. No, we're just trying to get a plea. They don't want you to fight for yourself. And the reason that they'll stop you and you won't do it is because you will be so threatened because your life is on the line that you take pleas. So that is why I'm just going to turn it over to you and you tell us all about that system.
Yes.
And I want everybody to listen. And if it's not in your town, do what you can, see why not, and do it before someone becomes affected. Because it happens. I'm a sister, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter. No one expected that in my life, but it happened.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your transparency, Sarita. What you're alluding to is, or referring to is, the work that I do with participatory defense, which is a model designed by the Debug Silicon Valley organization out of California to enable ordinary people to resist mass incarceration, one family and one life at a time. This model we use the lived experience of those of us who've gone through the court process. Like, I've been through the court process now 4 times. I've gone to trial 1 time out of the 4 times that I was before the court process. I'm not talking about as a juvenile, as an adult. Mm-hmm. And what I quickly recall, and hindsight being 2020, was I was confused. I didn't understand the language. They were talking over my head. I would say yes to things because I didn't feel comfortable saying no. I didn't know how to establish my boundaries. And this is a recipe for exactly what's happening in the United States of America, where 99%, you can look this up, 99% of the convictions in the United States of America are the result of plea agreements. 99%. And this happens every day. In fact, the psychology is so profound. When anyone goes to prison, or jail, one of the first things they hear from their peers is, man, don't roll the dice. At least that's what they say in Texas.
That's right.
They believe that asserting yourself and standing on your rights as an accused, because in this country we have policies and rules that say that we're innocent before we're innocent, we're assumed innocent, and the prosecutor has the burden to prove that we're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The reality is, yes. But nonetheless, we have the responsibility to defend ourselves when we enter into that kind of arrangement. And oftentimes people don't know how to do that. So participatory defense is a model that my organization that I work for here in Texas uses to, on the front end, reduce the outcomes of mass incarceration. The front door to mass incarceration is what's happening on the local level, in the courthouse, at the county jail. And we use this tool, number one, to educate the family members who have a loved one that's in the system, to educate the person who's navigating through that system. We ask them questions like, have you got your discovery? Have you asked this question? What is the evidence against you? we sit down and we strategize with these people. We're not attorneys, but we do what we can to offer input and suggestions that could lead to better outcomes.
That's exactly right. If someone would have guided and directed me, like I said, I would have fought harder for myself. And I thought about it. I had a lot of time to think about it. That I would have fought harder for myself because I had a, what they say, righteous case.
Mhm.
However, I didn't have a brother Rob Lilly, and I'm so glad that he is bringing this to the forefront because I just want to touch you. Like oftentimes people come into the system and they don't know about it all of the time. Nobody is, going to prison with a law degree on a regular basis. You're not going to be housed in a pod with somebody who already knows the ropes for every case and what could happen. You don't. You don't have that experience. Nobody's going to come in and say, well, I had a murder charge and this is exactly what happened with me, da 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 da. And now I'm back to tell you, no, that doesn't happen that way. So what this man is doing is a service that your lawyer, first of all, don't have a public defender. His docket is so big, he has no time for you. That's why he wants that plea. So to have someone to come in and tell you, hey, you do have a voice. Hey, you can see this. I remember being sentenced and just pouring in tears because nobody was really, advocating for the facts. At this point, my fate has already been sealed. And a lot of people don't even know about the Alford plea, where you're taking, my plea was from 10 to 22, open plea. That man could have gave me whatever he wanted. And he gave me 17, but he actually gave me 22. He gave me that 5 running at the same time. So when I went to get sentenced, I had no idea what was going to happen to me. Along with a lot of people, that plea is often unspecified. Can you speak to that?
Well, I mean, that's what happened in my instance. This last time that I found myself before the courts and the judge at 49 years of age, after having had 15 years of life outside of the institution, I had to grapple with some internal dynamics related to mental illness and substance use that hadn't fully been resolved. I found myself once again in the crosshairs of the system. So here I am. I know that I'm walking into a courtroom that has no mercy for me. I have a public defender that really is a public pretender.
That's
because
right.
they did not care for my life, but I really didn't have the resources, so I had no option. I had to trust someone that I could not in my heart trust. What a dilemma to be in. What a situation to be in. And I did the best I could to strategize for a better outcome. I was facing from the get-go 25 to life because I was habitual, meaning I had 2 prior felonies in the state of Texas, 2 prior felonies. In my instance, they enhanced me 2 paragraphs on I could lose the word right now. Anyway, the long story short,
The PSI
no,
pre-sentencing.
no,
Okay.
that was for the feds. We're talking
Okay.
about the indictment. They enhanced me. They gave me a 2-paragraph enhancement on my indictment,
Mm.
and so I was looking at 25 to life, and they wouldn't go down. And so 25 to life, I didn't know technically what that would mean in the eyes of the parole board, who ultimately would have to say on whether or not I would get released. So I had to essentially put myself before the court. And another caveat that I want to mention to this, which was there was another charge lingering over my head that I was guilty for, and I didn't want to stand before the judge saying I'm innocent. So I took the open plea.
Yeah.
They dismissed that charge because there wasn't any witness to corroborate it. But the end result was I threw myself at the quote unquote mercy of a merciless court. And so the interesting thing is I walked away with a 30-year sentence, and not a life sentence, but still a 30-year sentence. And in theory, I would have to do 3 years before I came up for parole in the state of Texas. But the reality was I was looked at as a habitual offender. So I didn't know what the system would do. Would they keep me for longer, or would they? So that's when I went into the prison system and determined that I would begin to understand as much as I could about the law and how to equip myself before the parole board, because at this point the only hope I had for release was through the parole board.
Yes.
I had to, as best I could, discern what is it that the parole board needs from me. How can I demonstrate to them that what happened was a result of mental illness and untreated substance use. What could I do to show them that I had begun to address these issues and that I was less of a risk if you released me? I had to grapple with all of those uncertainties because in Texas, probably like many other places, I'm not sure about Missouri, but in
Mhm.
Texas, they don't tell you, the board doesn't tell you what it is they expect of you.
Oh
It's
no, they don't tell us. They don't
Yes.
tell us. No.
So it's like going
But
into the room. Oh, good. I just want to say
well,
this. It's like
uh-huh.
going into a dark room with 5 doors. The lights are turned out, and you have to go to each door and figure which one of these doors is going to release you back into society. And that was very uncomfortable because here they are telling us that we go to prison to pay our debt to society, yet they don't tell us what kind of currency they'll accept.
Oh yes, and let me tell you, here's another thing, and this is just to speak on Missouri, but the parole board will do whatever it wants. That's what the parole board can do whatever it wants. You could have taken every class they had, and they know before you ever walked in there whether or not they're going to let you go. And this is what we say in the women's prison: whatever they say to you, just well, first of all, I never at acted like I didn't commit my crime. So I was already there because they want you to be have accountability, and I like that, brother Rob. You are very much accountable, because hey, mistakes happen, but you got to allow people to move on. Here's what the parole board in Missouri, I feel like, is a little bit different. Is they will just talk about things that are completely unrelated. And as a woman, what really hurt me is I had a lot of friends come back and they would throw their kids on them. Well, where were your kids while you were doing this? And da 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 da, and just really make people feel bad about themselves and beat them down. Now, I don't know if Texas is the same way, but no, they don't tell you what they want. But here's what it is: that whatever they say to you, just go with it because you want to go home. Did you
We
feel the
don't
same
even
way?
we don't even see directly a parole board.
Oh,
We
okay.
Yeah, there's never any face-to-face contact between us and the parole board. The only thing we can do to represent ourselves in that space is to submit a parole packet. And
So you
that's
don't, you never speak for yourself?
No, no. You can.
Oh
We do have access to an attorney, but that's a gamble. That's a gamble. There are some good parole attorneys, but again, like you've already indicated and like I've described, parole doesn't tell you necessarily what you want. Now, in
man.
TDCJ, they give you a individualized treatment plan, and so the
Okay.
treatment plan is supposed to tell you what, in theory, you need to do while you're in custody,
Mhm.
and ideally that's supposed to be evaluated and it's supposed to be assessed if whether or not you've complied, and that
Mhm.
should be in theory somehow factored into to their decision. But we have 5 or 7 different codes that they use when you're denied, and one of the top ones they often use is the nature of the crime. And the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, the nature of the crime is never going to change. I can never go
Absolutely.
back to that day and change what happened. All I can do is do from that point forward something different. And my
Yeah.
hope is that you would evaluate my life not based on something that's static and immutable. Like the
Mhm.
crime is never going to change, but I can change, and that's where I think this system to absolutely fails us because it's charged to do 2 things. It's charged in principle to contain us by
Mhm.
putting us away from society, right? Quote
Mhm.
unquote, protecting society, but then at the same time it's being lifted up as an institution that's going to rehabilitate us. The problem is, how are you going to rehabilitate people in an environment that's absolutely noxious,
Mm.
toxic, filled
Yes.
with people that are resentful? And if there was ever a space that we needed an opportunity to rectify ourselves with the crimes that we've done, it would be in the court space. But the court spaces are contentious. The DA
Mm.
is adversarial. The judge
Mhm.
is silent, and our defense attorney oftentimes is in collusion with the prosecutor and the judge.
Oh,
And so,
absolutely.
and
It's
so
all
we,
it's all planned. That's why that when you mention that, it all starts from day one. You know what? Re-entry starts from day one because you're trying to work on getting home. So if
yes.
someone is teaching you and showing you, hey, you're worth it, stand up from yourself from day one. I feel like, wow. Even though I would have got sentenced to some time, I would have felt a little bit better about it because I know that I helped myself as much as I could. And I'm not, I pride myself on not being dumb by any means. And I really feel like I was lost. I was lost. I woke up one day, my life had changed like that.
I can relate to that, and
Mhm.
well, for me, I think it was a little bit different in that for years I had been walking in a darkness of ignorance because in this
Mhm.
society, Our school systems are deplorable. In New York, they were deplorable. There wasn't any real thing. It wasn't anything like education that I was offered. It was incidental as a result of me moving schools from the South Bronx and going to schools in Westchester where the Jews and the Italians were mostly living, that I got access to anything that resembled education. And so I learned how to read. But
Wow.
but beyond that, I was ignorant about the world around me. Unfortunately, my father, who was there, was not the kind of adult who took time to educate me. Even though he was much older than my mother, he was born in 1924 and lived many years of experience. He didn't impart to me the tools that I needed to navigate the world. And so tragically, like many families that are devastated by some unfortunate loss, whether it be divorce or whether it be the loss of a loved one through death, there was this gap in my life. And the places, the institution that needed to, or that should have been there to fill it, they failed me. And so now prison became that container that they basically use. There's a scholar called, his name is Neely, Neely. He says what we have today is a waste management version of criminal justice. We're sending people down a conveyor belt to the waste heap. And when I realized that was what was happening to me, when I woke up in prison in around 1992, I realized I'm listening to the news. I'm listening to them call us super predators and using pejoratives to describe us. I realized they didn't say my name, Robert Lilly, but they were talking to me, and I took offense at it. And I determined that, you know what, from this day forward, I'm going to figure out what the hell is going on, because this is unacceptable. I know that I'm not waste. I know that my life is irredeemable, that I can do something to help myself if they but gave me an opportunity to do that and stop judging me and condemning me. And when I vowed to do that, the universe opened up to me. Resources came to me, people came to me, relationships started to get formed, but it was a gradual process.
Yep.
And it took many years before I had anything like a version of enlightenment. And I'm not saying that I've arrived anywhere, that I'm like superhuman, but the blessing that I have is that I've done it so many times wrong that today I can see the wrong way and be like, nah, brother, that's not the right way. It's a better way to go. And so I'm a resource today. And these experiences that I've accumulated give me a power today that makes me an asset. And if there was anything that I would want to leave this show with, for those listening in the audience, people like us can make amazing contributions to the world if you but just open up your doors, open up your pocketbooks, open up your ears, open up your hearts, and give us a chance to make that contribution.
Thank you. And we are not throwaway people. And just like he said, give us a chance. Okay, so when I went to jail and then prison, it was 2008. In 2022, I was coming home. Brother Rob, we are coming home. The majority of people in prison don't have a life sentence. They are coming home.
90%.
And what type of people do you want to come home? Yes. Do you want a Brother Rob? Do you want a Sarita? Or do you want somebody who has never had anyone show any type of interest? Thrown away in the system, comes out, has no one, nothing. Like I said, we're already operating from a deficit. What can you do to change that? How can you stop that process? Because you know what? Everyone has been touched by some type of crime, even if you just saw it on television. And I'm sure you're not promoting, you want to stop it just like everybody else does. Let me tell you, I didn't want to commit the crime I went for. I wasn't, if somebody would have moved next to my mom and I found out that she had killed her man and went to jail, even if she looked like me, I'd be like, get her out of here. You know why? Because I didn't have a context. And at that time, that wasn't me. And now that is me. That is something that I did, and that's who I am. Don't throw me away. Foster inside of me the leader that I am so I can help others. Rob said something earlier. We can't do it alone.
No.
Can we do it alone, Rob?
No, we cannot.
No, but we can do it in community. Thank you, Brother Rob.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you for coming on. And listen, I want to thank you. Wait, prison hug when you got to go through the glass. Robert's coming back on, okay? He's going to tell us more about the programs in Texas, and how can we get them everywhere? Because I know people watch this all over the United States. Thank you so much. I'm supposed to say it. It sounds schmoozy. Like, subscribe, and share. But man, I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Brother Rob. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for being